Good morning, church. Glad to see you all here this morning. Everybody's getting used to this and have some more each week trickling in. And so I'm glad that you're here this morning. If you are a guest with us this morning, we're thankful you've come our way and we hope we can meet you afterwards. I have to say a few things before we get into the lesson this morning. I don't know if it would be appropriate. I don't know if we need to have a moment of silence for the fact that we're losing the green frog. You're aware of that, right? Okay. So the owners told me their last day is going to be July 5th. So that's 2 weeks from today. Some of you may not care. You don't like the green frog. Others of you, maybe you're going to go there for lunch. Regardless of your feelings on it, you can't deny the history that it has had in this town. It was influenced the restaurant choice in the movie True Grit, for crying out loud. So it's going to be leaving us in a couple of weeks. So make sure you get your fix of the green frog before it goes out of town. Secondly, you might have thought that I forgot or had kind of moved on after I presented this, but I hadn't forgotten. A couple of weeks ago, I asked you to tell me what your dreams are for this congregation, where you would like us to be in the future, how we can impact this community. Now, several of you got right to me. You texted me and called me almost as soon as the final amen was said that Sunday. You were letting me know what your ideas were. Some of you took a little bit longer time to formulate those things and send them to me. I didn't really put a deadline on that, and so I'm going to encourage you and ask you to keep thinking about those things, keep sending those things in. When people say, Jacksboro Church of Christ, what do you want them to think of? What do we want to do in this community to have more of an impact in this town? And then the last thing is, if you're on our Wednesday Zoom call, you know this, but we talked about the idea of moving forward and getting back to somewhat normal as far as our lessons and what we're doing here on Sunday mornings. For 9 weeks, I guess, I did lessons that were about the times that we were in. It would be silly to not acknowledge the fact of what was going on. You were watching me on a video camera, and so we knew what was going on, and we addressed it, and it was good for that time that we were in. But we just decided, we could keep doing this, and who knows, we might look back a year from now and say, wow, we preached a whole year on COVID-19 related stuff. I don't really want to preach on that long. You probably don't want to listen to that long. And so this morning we're going to move forward with our lessons and go back to a series that we had started back in March. Remember March? Oh, March. That was the good old days, right? So we started a series back in March. We got 2 weeks into it, and then the world lost its mind, and so we had to kind of stop. And so we're going to pick up on that. Now, if things change in the future, whether it's COVID-19 stuff, there's a big developing story there, whether it's the racial tension stuff that's going on right now, we talked about last week, if there's something that we as a church need to address, we'll do that. I don't know what else 2020 could throw at us. If aliens invade, we'll probably spend a Sunday talking about that. We'll discuss whatever we need to, but for the moment, we're just going to move forward with what we had already started. And so to do that, I don't expect you to remember any of this because it was back in March. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 or 6 slides of just quick review of what we looked at the first 2 weeks of this series, and then we'll pick right back up and we'll go into week 3. Okay? Sound good? So we talked about this verse. This series was about the sayings that Jesus had on the cross. There's 7 statements that Jesus makes when he's hanging on the cross. The first one we looked at was Luke 23. Jesus saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So we talked about this idea of forgiveness. We talked about the relationship between forgiveness and anger, how sometimes we hold on to things, we resent people, we're bitter because we haven't forgiven someone, and that ends up hurting us more than the person who offended us. And so we looked at Ephesians 4, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. And so we said that forgiveness is not just something that we go around and pick and choose our moments, but if we're going to be like Jesus and follow in his footsteps, we have to make forgiveness this constant attitude that we have. That everywhere we go, we are looking to be people who fix things, who mend broken relationships, that be the ones that are forgiving. And so that was week 1. Week 2, we went into another passage in Luke 23, where the thief on the cross, the criminal on the cross, says, Jesus, remember me when you come in your kingdom. And he said to him, truly I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise. So we took a little bit of time that week explaining the difference between paradise and heaven. We basically said that at your death, you enter into paradise. At the resurrection, or the coming of Christ, we have heaven. We talked about that idea for a little bit. We talked about the trouble that sometimes people bring up in this verse. We talk about the criminal on the cross, and people say, oh, well, hang on, the criminal on the cross, he wasn't baptized. And we explored that. We said the old covenant's still in effect. Jesus is still on the cross. The church hasn't started yet. And so we talked about that. We said that this is not so much a verse on the plan of salvation, but rather the man of salvation, the one who is doing the saving. And so we talked about his passion, Christ's passion for the lost is revealed at the cross. We looked at all these examples in Luke's gospel, where Jesus says, I've come to seek and save what was lost. He tells the parables of the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. We go through all these examples, and even at the cross, he's still passionate for the lost people. And we talked about that today. How do we put that into practice? How does that apply to us? We talked about that example of when we see amber alerts or silver alerts, you may not have cared at all what people were driving as you're going down the road, but as soon as you get that notification, you're a little bit more aware of what's going on, and you're looking for that type of vehicle. And so we talked about we need to have this expectation that when we go out to the world, to be looking for people who are lost, to be looking for opportunities, and that we're going to influence more people than if we just casually go through life. Okay? So, we are now caught up. That's what we did the first 2 weeks. We're going to go into the 3rd week of this series. This passage is going to be in John chapter 19. If you want to turn over there, we're going to look at John 19 and another one of these statements that Jesus makes on the cross. And so he starts there in verse 25. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus then saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. So, a couple things. Jesus makes this statement to his mother. The disciple whom Jesus loved is John. Okay? And so he is telling his mom, he's telling his mother, this is not your son, but treat him like he's your son. And then he tells John, this is not your mother, but treat her like she's your mother. And so what Jesus is introducing is something that we're going to see go on even in the early church when we go into the book of Acts. He is ushering in this new way of doing life. That you don't have to be related to be family. That we can all be together, we can all be together as one because our rallying point is the cross. That we can meet at the cross and find common ground there. And so he's saying, this isn't your mom, but treat her like your mom. This isn't your son, but treat him like your son. And so Christ is breaking down even biology and genetics. He's saying it doesn't matter. From now on, think of each other as family. There's a lot of things that divide us. There's a lot of different things that are going on in our world right now that we pick sides. And if you're not on one side, then you're on the other side, and we're at war together. And I thought, how can I best explain this? And forgive me if I have to use an Oklahoma example, but growing up in Oklahoma, this is probably best represented in the fact that growing up there, you were either an OSU fan, or you were someone who needed an extra dose of Jesus, or an OU fan, I should say. And so you were in one of these camps, and everybody is divided among these two groups for the most part. Now, in my own family, we were mostly OSU. My mom's side was mostly OSU fans. We had a couple bad apples that were OU fans, but for the most part, all OSU fans. My dad's side, especially all OSU fans. They grew up in that area of Agra and Yale, and so they were obviously OSU fans. Now, Mandy's family is a little bit different. On her mom's side, it's probably 60-40, 70-30 OSU fans. On her dad's side, it is all OU fans. And in fact, Mandy's dad was an all-state football player at UConn and actually had a scholarship and went to OU on the football team for a couple of years when Switzer was there. So you can imagine why they would cheer for OU. That made sense to them. So everybody picks a side. You're either one or the other. And that's just fun, okay? It's fun. We talk about the Bedlam game every year, and we talk about sports, and then say, well, it's not just about sports, who has the better school, and so we go back and forth, and there's this, this friendly dialogue. Now, sometimes it gets out of hand, but for the most part, it's for fun. Now, I'll tell you, if you go into other places, it's not, just a little thing that we just kind of rib each other on. If you go into Alabama, I have a friend that is from Alabama and went to Auburn. And he had family that just almost disowned him because they were Alabama fans and he went to Auburn. That's a pretty serious rivalry there. So this is just for fun. This is just one little silly thing that divides us. But what if we were to look at things that are more serious? Things that actually matter. So we looked last week about this idea of race. We're going to draw lines, right? That's what the world wants us to do. And we just say, well, because you're over here, then you must be the enemy. We just lump everybody in together. We have a dividing line of rich versus poor. See it all over the place. You're either with us or you're over there in the other group. And we're drawing lines. The world is wanting us to pick a side. How about educated versus uneducated? We're drawing lines. We're creating division. Now, here's the most obvious one, probably the one that's the most divisive right now. This is an election year. You understand. How about Republican versus Democrat? You want to talk about division. You want to talk about picking a side, and our side is right and your side is wrong, right? There's probably no better example than that. And so the world is always telling us to pick a side, that we have these things that we have to do. And so we've created this me versus you, us versus them. And that if you're not with us, then you're the enemy. And so we have to pick a side. And that's what the world will have us to do. What I want us to see is what Jesus is doing. He's offering an alternative and saying, no matter what lines the world may ask you to draw, I've erased them. I've taken them away. I've allowed everybody to be a part of my family, and I want you to regard those around you as family, regardless of their background, regardless of whether they're on the other side or not, that you can all be family through me. And so I want us to think about this idea that the church is really a family where everybody is invited. It doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter if you are a Republican or a Democrat, you can be part of God's family. Everybody is invited to be a part. When you go back and look at this scene on the cross, and Jesus is hanging there on the cross, you have to think about all the different things that are going on from all the different facets of what's at play here in Jesus being on the cross. So if you look at these things, there's a lot of dividing lines even going on in this crucifixion story. So we have the soldiers versus Jesus. In the physical realm, this is the most obvious. We have the soldiers against this one man. Then we have, politically, we have big bad Rome versus Jesus. Religiously, we have the religious leaders, we have the Sanhedrin versus Jesus. And of course, spiritually, we have Satan versus Jesus. And so even on the cross, we have all these dividing lines that are at play, and Jesus goes to the cross and wipes them all away. He says, it doesn't matter. We can all be one because you all accept me. We can all accept one another because you have first accepted me. And so we go throughout the New Testament, there's a lot of language of us being mentioned, the church being mentioned as a family. 1 Timothy 3, Galatians 6, Ephesians 2, they all talk about the household of faith. It talks about us being a family, that the church is a family. And so how do we do this? How do we conduct ourselves? How do we put in practice this thing that Jesus said back in John 19? Well, Paul gives us a pretty good clue into this. In 1 Timothy 5, he says, take this idea forward. Okay, you remember when we had Mary, and he says, Mary, John's not your son, but treat him like a son. John, this is my mother, not yours, but treat her like she's your mother. So here's what Paul says. Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father. Appeal to the younger men as if they were your brothers. The older women as mothers. And the younger women as sisters. In all purity. One of the things that I've been impressed with this congregation is the fact that I feel that we do this pretty well. You do it pretty well. There are members in this church who, I'm not your son, but you treat me like your son. Mandy's not your daughter, but you treat her like a daughter. You treat my kids like they're your kids and your grandkids. You do that with all the other little ones that we have. It doesn't matter that they're not yours, right, by genetics. You treat them as if they were your family. And on the flip side, we have many of the younger crowd who look up to the older people in this congregation, and we respect you and we honor you as if you were our parents or our grandparents. Now we just treat everybody like family. We may not be related. Now I do understand that many of you in this room actually are related, okay? But we may not be related in the earthly way, in the physical bonds, you know, our genetics and things like that, our biology, but we can all be related because we appeal to a better blood, right? Not our family blood, but the blood of Christ. That through that sacrifice, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our background, we're family. I was originally going to do this next slide at the beginning of the lesson, and I thought, man, that would be really cool. Okay, so just know that I was thinking of you when I put this at the very end of the lesson, because I did not want you to have to deal with the hunger pains throughout. So, just an example of how easy it is to divide people and pick a side. For fun, I thought it would be good to put this in here. You can only choose one. You can only choose one. Which one's the best? Texas Roadhouse rolls, Cheddar Bay biscuits from Red Lobster, Olive Garden breadsticks, or that bread from Outback. I don't even know the name of it. It's brown. Right? And so if we were to go around the room and say, which one is your favorite? Or if we were even to make it more serious and say, you can only pick one to have for the rest of your life. You can't ever have the other three. You can only pick one. That might make it a little bit more serious if we raise the stakes. It'd be very easy for us to pick a side and say, no, you're wrong. This one's better, right? It's just silly how easy it is for us to draw lines and to pick a side. And so as the church, we have to do the opposite. We have to be people who unify and who accept other people. Not always constantly looking to divide people. Now, one of these is Olive Garden. That made me think of the commercial. I don't know if you remember this. This is about 15 years ago. And Olive Garden had a commercial, and of course, you know, it was a little bit different as far as what they were promoting. They were talking about, hey, we found this new way to cook a noodle, or whatever their new dish was, or we're having this, you know, promotion of all-you-can-eat pasta or whatever. And it was always the same scene. You know, you'd have a little girl laughing, ha 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 ha, she's eating her salad, and the mom is smiling, you know, lovingly at her son, and the dad's grinning ear to ear as he passes the breadsticks. And they bring out the food, and they would always set it down in front of him. What's their reaction? They always go, oh, you know, when they sit back when the pasta's delivered, like they'd never seen spaghetti and meatballs before. Oh, it's, you know, our food's here. And then they would cut to the logo, and they would say Olive Garden. When you're here, you're family. Remember that? I thought, that's pretty good. Good on Olive Garden's marketing department, right? Come in here, it's like a family meal. When you sit down at our table, it's like you're being with family, and we're going to sit together and eat together and laugh together. It's got this warm, fuzzy feeling attached to it. It's good. But if you think about it, that's a really, really good motto for the church, is it not? That when we are here, regardless of what differences we had when we walked in the door, regardless of whether you and I agreed on every little thing, when we are here, the aim is the same. That we are here to worship and glorify God. that we agree on the things that matter. We just sang this song, A Common Love. These things that we have in common, the things that actually matter. We may not agree on everything, but we agree on what matters. So here's what these things are. Paul, we call these the list of ones. Paul will say in Ephesians 4, there is one body, one Spirit, just as also you were called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. We may not agree on everything, but I am thankful that as I look at it, this church family, we agree on the things that matter, that we agree on these things, that we can be a family because we agree on all of these. So this week, here's what I would like for us to think about, to put into practice. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about family. There's probably not a more sacred group, even back then and even today, as the family unit, as the family circle. And so we need to understand that we're talking about the spiritual family, but we also need to recognize the fact that we also have physical families. And so I would encourage you, whether you get along with them or not, to honor your earthly family. And then I would encourage us to celebrate and to thank God for our church family here. When was the last time that you just thanked God that you were able to be a part of His family? And then the last thing, we need to be looking for these opportunities to invite other people to be a part of the family. The invitation is for everybody. And so we need to make sure that we're not withholding this good news from others around us. If we can be invited, if we can be accepted, then anybody can be accepted. And so we need to be looking for opportunities to bring more people into the family. And so the church truly is a family. We're all welcome. And so we don't need to draw lines that Jesus has already erased. And so this week, let's be the family of God. Let's pray together, please. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this church family. Father, we know that we don't always agree, that we may not always see eye to eye. But Father, we do agree on the sacrifice of your Son. We agree on the gospel story and know that it is the power to save. And so, Father, we rally around the foot of the cross, knowing that despite our differences, that we can come together on common ground, and that we can have a common mission as we go out into this world. Father, we are so thankful to be a part of your family, that you would even include us and allow us to be your children. And Father, as your family, help us look to the needs of one another, that we not see somebody as just another member of this church, but that we see them as a family member, that we see them as a brother or a sister or a parent, grandparent. Father, help us to love one another as family and help us to invite others to be a part of your family. We thank you for Jesus who makes this all possible. It's through his name that we pray. Amen. Amen.